Hello YouTube, hello everyone. This week I have been mostly reading From the Mind of Ujames1978, a collection of 11 short stories by, well, James Ashcroft, Ujames1978, linked below. I ask that anyone rolling their eyes and thinking that James already gave them a piece of his mind once and they weren't all that keen, please remember that this is literature, and that if Charles Dickens had been an anti-statist, Muslim fundamentalist, apologist, anarchist, communist, misogynist, child rape enabling, rad fem MRA, and no one can prove that he wasn't, this would have little or no bearing on the quality of his stories. Following introductions by both the author and Kittiwake Publishing's own Ian Warner, Darth Azabrush, linked below, these 11 stories are somewhat eclectic, like the TV series The Twilight Zone, from vampires to time travel, from warfare to romance, and usually with a twist. Perhaps the biggest criticism I have of much of this anthology is that, appropriately enough, while you get a sort of yo sushi feel of many tiny, diverse mouthfuls, there is also sometimes a somewhat Chinese takeaway sense of being left hungry still, as a weary old vampire. The opening story, Because It's a Lie, which might best be described as a poignant cyberpunk love story, although a thoughtful and haunting concept, sort of feels like a scene from the end of a film, and you've tuned in for the end and need to buy the DVD actually to see all that went before. Story 2, Drink Till We Drown, is the first of 2 vampire stories, and deals with a favourite passion of Hugh James's, mercy for someone you'd expect to be perceived as a threat or enemy, a theme which runs through much of the collection. The vampirist protagonist has filed down her fangs. The fanglessness would be forgivable if at any point in the whole anthology James had thought to include a lesbian couple, but I am sure this terrible omission was simply a mistake and will doubtless be corrected in future reprints. This is followed by another vampire tale, Eternal Life, which, like its fellow, enters the mind of a vampiress and seeks to garner sympathy for her, though this time the blood-sucking protagonist is less innocent or harmless, although whether she is also less sympathetic is perhaps subjective. It also begs the age-old question as to whether immortality is a curse or a blessing. It retains the misty urban feel of its predecessor, while adding some much-needed blood and gore. That said, I found the stories similar enough to think they shouldn't have been consecutive, but it's a minor quibble. Once again, I feel like these should be elements of a larger story, with the 2 vampire characters and situations running parallel. The 4th offering is a stark morality tale called Hearts and Minds, and is set in an Iraqi war zone. Abu, a peaceful man who has lost his family, faces the dilemma as to whether to aid a badly injured US pilot, and their encounter explores the attitude of each character toward the other. A hard one to describe without spoilers, but needless to say ultimately powerful. Sadly, while it has a message which challenges the views of many, such people are not likely to buy a book by Ujames1978, and like a lot of things, it will mainly preach to the converted. Fifthly, we have A Perfect Day, a touching little story, but little to it, bar the idyllic imagery of the writing and the twist at the end, so difficult to describe without an absolute spoiler. Next, my second favourite story from the mind of James Ashcroft, She Did Exist, sees a man on community service in a mental hospital befriending a talented artist. A nameless patient who displays violent outbursts and claims she does not exist. Again, erring on the side of caution spoiler-wise, suffice it to say I found She Did Exist to be evocative and thought-provoking, though perhaps it should have been thrashed out into a full novella in its own right, maybe with a little more detail in some of the characters. 7th in the collection is The Aftermath, another war story, but this time in a futuristic dystopian world. The last survivor of the battle is a programmed killing machine, and after finishing off the last of the enemy, it is confused to see a flower growing through the bloodshed. What will it do? The Confession is a bittersweet love story of passion and grief, deftly written and brought my girlfriend to tears. The Debt of Blood is the 9th helping of Hugh James' mind, presumably set in an imaginary medieval kingdom, and a somewhat bleak and bloody one. Although verging on the edge of misery porn and the hardest reading of the anthology, its message to do with grief, debt, vengeance and forgiveness comes across strongly. Penultimately, there is The Power of His Will, a very short story which returns us to outer space once more, to see a stranded astronaut think of nothing but his longing to see his lover's face once more. Saving the best till last, Love to Hate may be the best short story I have ever read, and made my girlfriend cry even more than before. Taking an unexpected twist into Twilight Zone territory, but with so much more depth of character and emotion, it surpasses most of that format. In summary, one gets the impression James was saving the best until last. Please try to overlook the errors in some of the earlier stories, as writers tend to proofread the work we are most pleased with rather more. Several of the stories stand out on their own and would make either good films, parts of films, or work well as one-off television dramas. Published by Kittiwake and available through lulu.com, From the Mind of Ujames1978 is priced at £2 for the ebook and £8 for the paperback, and I genuinely recommend it.